How are we doing, guys? B-Sticks here, and we are going to take a deep dive into the chords of Tyler the Creator today. We're going to look at one of his most popular songs, Are We Still Friends, which samples Al Green's 1977 track, Dream. So there's some really interesting musical things we're going to look at today, from secondary dominance to some modal interchange, but I'm going to break it down into really simple form so that you can understand it, follow along, and then you can apply this knowledge to your own samples. So this sample is going to be available in my new Levels 2 kit, which the free mini kit is going to be linked down there, and go grab some of my other free mini kits. And so let's jump over to the piano and get into it. So let's look at the chords of the main body of the song, which is in F major, the key of F major. So the first chord we've got is the 1 chord, an F major 7. Then we've got a 5 chord that leads us to the 4 chord. So that would be an F dominant 7. We go to the 4 chord, which is the B flat major 7. Then we go to a B flat minor chord. So all we need to do is that, but I like to play that chord. So I've got that G note on top, which is the minor 6. In order to look at this and make it easy for you, we're going to transpose from the key of F to the key of C major. So again, we know that all the white keys are in the scale of C major. So if we take this down to C major, the song begins in its simplest form with a 1 chord, which is a C major chord. So if we just make a C major triad here with the 1, the 3 and the 5 in the C major scale, let's add one more note to make it a C major 7th. So we skip another note and we just add this B on top. So we've got that beautiful sounding chord there. Now remember from our other lessons where we could take this B, move it down an octave from here to here and get that voicing. The second chord is interesting. It's also based on a C root, but what it actually is a secondary dominant chord. So what does that mean? Normally, the dominant chord in any major scale would be made from the 5th degree of the scale. So if we walk up 5 to the G, the dominant 7 chord in C major would be a G dominant chord. So there's a G major chord. Now we have to add a minor 7th on top of that chord, which in the case of G is the note F. So if we add an F on top, we get an interesting sound that sounds mysterious and unresolved. So it wants to pull us back to see that? So it wants to pull back to its parent chord. What we're doing with the secondary dominant is we are going to make our second chord, this C chord, a C dominant, will pull us to the 4 chord in the scale. If we look at our target chord, which is an F chord, which is the 4 chord in C major, 1, 2, 3, 4, there's our F chord. Then what is the 5 of F? So it's a C. So if we play a C dominant chord, a C dominant 7, we add a minor 7 on top, that's a C dominant chord, that will want to pull and resolve back to the F. And all I'm doing there is I'm playing an F chord, but I've moved the notes around, if you can see. So it might be easier for you to understand if I play this C, and then I go, and then I go. So check that out. That's in its most basic form. So we go from a C7, a C dominant 7 chord, to an F. What we tend to do is move notes around to make things flow better, so that notes flow into each other better. So let's develop on this concept here, and let's take our C major 7th chord. Let's drop this B an octave down to here, and then let's look at a way we can play a C dominant 7th chord. So this note here, the B flat, is in the C dominant 7th chord. So what about if we drop that an octave too? Then we've got this. That sounds really nice. We've got the bass note is actually moving down, and these 3 notes are staying the same. So we've got Now we're looking for an F major 7 chord. Let's make an F chord. So we got an F major 7 chord built like that, F, A, C and E. So those 3 chords now would be, doesn't that sound really beautiful? Now, going to the minor 4 chord is really, really popular, and it's basically modal interchange. Now, in there is we're playing a minor 4 chord, and that's done in a ton of songs over the years, R&B, pop. The Beatles used to love using that. So what happens is we go from the F major 7 to the F minor 7. What we're doing here is modal interchange. We are in the key of C major, but we are borrowing chords from C minor, and that works because as long as we pull back to the tonic of C major, we are able to use those chords to extend the harmony and colour that we can pull out of our chord progressions. So let's listen to those 4 chords all together now. So we've got beautiful, right? So we've looked at dominant 7th, secondary dominance, and we've also looked at modal interchange. So let's jump into Logic and see what we can do with our own sample in order to build something really interesting. So the vibe here is very much vintage sample, and we are in 6/8, which means there are 6 eighth notes in a bar. So we're counting like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And a lot of 70s soul records, like the one that Tyler used to create this track, were in 6/8 time signature. So I've programmed some basic chords here. Our first chord is a C major 7th. I've doubled up on the C octaves. In fact, I've then put our major 7th here. I have then got our E, which is our major 3rd, and then the G on top, the 5th on top. That particular voicing sounds like this. Nothing too exciting. I'm just showing you these chords for 2 bars long, and then I'll show you how I made them more interesting, more natural, and more like what an actual keyboard player would play. Sorry if you can hear an ice cream truck in the background, but yeah, just try and ignore that. Our next chord was the C7, which, if you remember, is the 5 chord of the 4 chord in C major. So a secondary dominant chord. So it's pulling us to that F major chord, some form of F major. It could be an F major 7th, could be an F major triad, could be an F major 9th, and so on and so on. So that sounds like this. And all we've done is I've taken the B and I have flattened it, and that's given us the minor 7th, and that immediately changes the quality, the tonal quality of that chord. So just by changing the one note, you've got the dominant 7th sound, which is really, really popular, as I said, in soul music, R&B music, and pop music as well. So then we go to an F major 7th chord. So I've got an F here, which I've just done 3 instances of the F, and then I have got the A here, which is our major 3rd, and the E, which is our major 7th. Now, I'm not playing the 5th here. I dropped the 5th out, and you can do that. You don't always need to put the 5th note in. I mean, the 5th is the C here. You can put that in if you want, but not necessarily. I mean, look, here's with the 5th. Sounds nice and full, but if I take the 5th out, it just gives us a little different kind of quality, chordal quality to it there. For the 4th chord, I took the A, flattened it to that G sharp note, which gave us a lovely F minor chord, and also I added the D on top, which, if you remember from over at the keyboard, that makes it an F minor 6th chord. So check this out. Really haunting quality to that chord. Those chords sound fine. They're nice, pretty voicings, but there's no rhythm and there's no real human feel to them. So if we look at this MIDI roll here, much more interesting, some variation. I've also done some top chords where I've strummed out, done a slightly different voicing, which a keyboard player would naturally do. You hear this in the actual Are We Still Friends track as well. So if I just solo this initially, I've also panned it way off to the right. So let's have a listen. Now it might sound a bit strange on its own, but in the context of everything else, it sounds really, really good. So, and all I'm doing here up top is I'm just playing with different inversions of the chord at the top of the keyboard to try and emulate what a real keyboard player would do. Now the sound that I used for this was in the Sky Keys, and it was the About Time preset. Put some processing on, some Valhalla vintage verb, some RC20, some channel EQ, and this tremolator, which made it sound like this. There's a lot more character to the sound now. I added a choir, and all I did was, you know me, I like to do quite close voicings on choirs because I think they sound really good. But they're exactly the same chords, but check this out. Two sounds together sounded like this. The bass in next, and this bass I danced around quite a lot and really made a play on the 6/8 feel, especially here with these little fills. All of these notes here coming from within the C major scale, just some rhythmic walk-ups, just giving some variation, trying again to emulate what a real bass player would do here. And as usual, I'm using the Scarby Rickenbacker bass and a little bit of decapitator on it just to give it some saturation and helps the sound cut through on small speakers, and also just gives a little bit of vintage bite to the sound. I then added a Glockenspiel, a counter rhythmical thing here. So I program this very simple arpeggio, just going from the E, G to the C, which is a inversion of a C major triad. So have a listen to this with the sound. It sounds like this. And we notice here that why I made these little gaps in the EP and the electric piano, just to give space. I didn't want to have sounds that were just going all the way through. If they are going all the way through, then they're going to be buried quite low in the mix and they're going to be more pad-like. So I've got a Mellotron doing something like that, and also a pedal tone, which I've told you before is just one note going all the way through really quietly, and that adds emotion to the sample. So speaking of that pedal tone, I used Logic strings, no processing whatsoever on there, and if we just play that on its own, have a listen. I am just pedaling on the C, which is the tonic or the one of the scale that we're in. And it's not doing much, but again, a lot of subtle things add up to big things in when they're all put together in the end. So here we go. See, everything has its space and it all sounds like it's arranged, and I wanted to go for that kind of Motown-y 70s flavour here. The next sound was the Mellotron, and I went for my trusty Arturia Mellotron on the Strawberry Flutes patch, and I left it as it was. Added a little bit of EQ to filter it out, some RC20 and some vintage verb, and it sounded like this. The reason that I cut these chords after every couple of bars is because the old Mellotron ran on tapes, and it feels almost a bit more natural to have it stop rather than it just go the whole way through. So I put a few stops here. This note continues underneath, but these imperfections can make things sound less like they're just MIDI copied and more like they're actual musicians playing them. I wanted to add some vocals because obviously these old samples had vocals in them, so I went to Arcade and I opened up the jukebox vocals because they tend to have some good old school 70s little chops in there, and I got this. So again, pitch them up an octave just to not get in the way of any other vocals that might be coming in when the producer or the songwriter comes and gets involved. Then some drums. I used Addictive Drums on this, the vintage dry kit. Added some J37, another one of my favourites, tape emulations. A bit of Decapitator again with Punish on, and the mix is quite high on this. But we got this kind of sound, which a really, really hot tape-driven drum sound, which I really like. Added a a little tambourine loop on top. So nothing too crazy there, but with everything else in, we've got this now. That sounds really, really good. The only thing that I wanted to add was, and you notice this in the Are We Still Friends, there's a couple of contrasting sections where really strong synth patches come in. Now, I wanted to use an organ, so let's have a listen. I brought this organ in here at bar 17 for some variation. And all I've done here, I know that it looks like there's a lot of notes, so I've just doubled up some of the notes that are in the chords and tried to give a little bit more weight to the sound, because it's the only sound that's playing here. Oh, you hear another sound come in there. So I got this interstellar pad, which sounds like this. Got some interesting movement with that pad there. And I also added this guitar melody, which I took this directly from the Tyler track. I walked down from the B to the A sharp to the A to the G sharp. So a chromatic walk down. Chromatic just means playing every note one after the other that are on the keyboard. So check this out now together. Adds a really haunting quality to the sample, that does. And I also brought that motif in here at bar 9. Just experiment, play with chromaticism, play with secondary dominance, which you understand now, I hope. If you've got any questions, hit me up on my Instagram and I'm happy to chat there. But hopefully this gave you a little insight into the theory and how you can kind of start to get your head into these vintage soul samples in a maybe a more advanced way, but still simple. So anyway, go cop my kits and I'll see you on the next video.